How many of you guys have ended up with a bunch of pumpkins at the end of fall season and you have no idea what to do with them? Well, come along with me on this journey. I will show you what you can do with all those beautiful decorating pumpkins that you bought during the fall season, and now it's Christmas and you have no idea what to do with them. Let me start by saying that these pumpkins were not originally mine. They were my mom's. They were decorating pumpkins that she brought over because she thought that I would feed them to the chickens. But it turns out that she did not know that you could cook these pumpkins. You can definitely cook these pumpkins. You can candy these pumpkins also, but I don't like having sweets around the house, so I ended up just pureeing all of these pumpkins. Maybe at some point I can make a video candying the pumpkin, but I only pureed them. It's a good big old pumpkin. It's pretty difficult. You kind of want to cut it into smaller pieces. This pumpkin had a very thick skin. It was extremely difficult to break down. So guys, just be careful, use a very sharp knife and try and keep your fingers out of the way as best you can. But just cut it up. I'm not cutting it up in any certain way. I'm just cutting it up to small pieces so that I can put it on a sheet pan and stick it in the oven and cook to puree. You don't have to do any kind of fancy cutting, any kind of fancy anything. Just keep your fingers out of the way so that you don't end up cutting yourself. I'm going to turn these into puree. And some of it to pumpkin soup. Okay, so because I'm pressed for time and I rarely can actually wash these pans, I always cover them with aluminum foil, which is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to try to. It's my 1-year-old on my hip. You can skip this step if you're not pressed for time. But I do it to save time so that I don't have to clean the sheet pans after I'm done cooking with them. But then I also put parchment paper down because aluminum foil is made with foil. With aluminum, I mean. Just put your pieces on here. Like I said, I'm going to use some of this pumpkin puree for a soup, and then the rest of it I'm going to freeze it for like pancakes, like pumpkin pancakes or pumpkin pie, pumpkin anything really. And you can bake it ahead of time and then freeze it. So I'm actually not going to put anything on them. I'm just going to stick them in the oven as is at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and that's it. And then I'll show you guys what they look like when they come out. So now, what do we do with the guts? So I always save the seeds, which is, you get this big old clump of goop. And I basically just squeeze the seeds out. Now, if you don't have time to take the seeds out, or when I don't have time to take the seeds out, I just give it to the chickens. They love it. So if you have chickens, dogs like it a lot too. My dog likes it. So you can give it to them. You can try it out, see if they like it. And you just separate them as best you can. This pumpkin wasn't very gooey and stringy, so it's been fairly easy to separate it. Just separate them. You helping me? Oh. Not much, but it does have like a little bit of gut on them, so I just give them a little rinse. They don't have to be perfectly clean. So in order for the salt to stick to the pepitas, I add an egg white. I'm gonna save the egg yolk for an omelet or something. You whip it a bit just for it to get frosty. Frothy. Just want it to be frothy. It doesn't have to be like meringue or anything, just frothy, but either way. Just gonna use the spoon that I used to gut my pumpkin. So this is what I had left over. If you had a bigger pumpkin, then you would use all of it. If you had a smaller pumpkin, you'd have more left over. So I'm gonna add some salt to this. And I'm still kind of thinking how I want to flavor them. Next minute, so I'm gonna do za'atar with sumac. Should taste pretty good. So you want to let this dry a little so that you notice it's really wet. I'm not sure if you could tell, but it's really wet. So you want it to dry a little, and then once it dries, you want to add some oil to it, any oil of your choosing, but I'm going to do avocado oil. So I'm going to let it sit for a little bit, let it dry, and then we'll come back. Okay, so I gave them a little mix. They are still wet, not too wet though. And I'm gonna let them dry just a little more. So the reason that I do the egg white is because the egg white allows for the seasoning to stick to it. See how like it's nice and wet? So it'll actually stick to the nut. So you can do this with almonds, peanuts, whatever you want to do it with. You can even do it with chickpeas, like if you do the crispy chickpeas in the oven. And the seasoning will actually stick to the nut instead of just sliding off. So, so that's what the pumpkin looks like. We want it to look nice and caramelized, so it's not quite. Okay, so back to the pumpkin seeds. So the pumpkin seeds are a lot drier now. You can see they're not so wet. They're still a little wet, but not nearly as wet as they were. So I'm gonna take some avocado oil. Just a very small amount. That was a little more than I wanted.
What smells good?
And then all right, so we have our pumpkins completely cooked. It's nice and soft. If you push it down, it's just like goo. So I have a Vitamix. You can blend it either in your Vitamix or you can do a food processor. It's easier for me just to do it in the Vitamix, but if you don't have one, you can do it in the food processor. If you don't have a food processor, if you have a blender, you can do that. I'm doing it in the Vitamix because half of it's gonna go to a soup, and then the other half is just gonna become a puree to put in the freezer for pancakes, waffles, pumpkin pie, just any kind of pumpkin puree. So I'm gonna go ahead and stick the pumpkin in the food processor, and then I'll show you how I blend it in the Vitamix in a bit. So you can either put the pumpkin in a mason jar or you can put it in a Ziploc bag. I will show you guys both methods. I'm gonna put this one in a mason jar because I'm gonna make the pumpkin soup tomorrow. So I'm just prepping my stuff for today, and then I'm gonna go ahead and cook it tomorrow. And I'm gonna put the other one in a Ziploc bag because that one's going in the freezer, and it just less risk of your mason jar actually breaking in the freezer, because I've had a lot of mason jars break on me recently when I take them out of the freezer. So I just do plastic bags now. It's more wasteful, but it's just how it's had to be lately because it's so hard to find mason jars now. So this will go in the fridge, and then I'm gonna go ahead and put the other pumpkin in here, and I'll blend it and I'll show you how I put it in a plastic. So I use the tamper to be able to get it nice and smooth. And it is just really smooth. It's still really hot because it just came out of the oven. You close it and you leave like a little slit open. And then because it's warm, it should be easy to get the air out. If you get it like up to the top and then kind of squish the air out and seal it all the way. See, it's a really nice tight fit. I'm gonna do the same thing with the next one. And I lay these flat. I lay them flat to cool. They're not hot, like real hot, but I don't like putting warm things in the freezer. So I just lay them flat. I let them cool to room temperature, and then I stick them in the freezer and lay them flat like this to make more space so you can stack them like next to each other. Just makes more space in the fridge. Okay, so these are the pumpkin seeds. As you can tell, they're nice and crispy. And the filling actually stuck to them. I literally just took them out. It took them about 30 minutes in a 350-degree oven. I took them out. I'm just gonna let them cool now, and I'll show you what they look like once they're cool enough for me to hold in my hands. But this is what you can do with the pumpkin seeds from your pumpkin instead of throwing them out in the trash can. Okay, so the pumpkin seeds are out of the oven. They're cool to touch. And this is what they look like. See how the spices are actually stuck to the nut itself instead of just being on the cookie sheet? They don't taste like egg. They're just nice and crispy, as you can hear. They're nice and crispy. And all the spices are actually stuck to the pumpkin seeds. They're super good. And a waste for less waste. But like I said, if you don't have time to put them in the oven and wait for them, you can always give them to your dog or to your chickens if you have chickens like we do. But that's it. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you guys were able to learn something today. Have a good day.